Welcome back, everybody. This is Brian Kirk with Eat to My Own Beat, taking the road less traveled with an episode of News of the World. And this week we are adding, what country are we adding to our mix of countries that we're doing for the news? We're adding Antigua and Barbuda. So we're going to start off with Afghanistan, where there's been some tragic news. This story is from BBC. Taliban in Afghanistan have appealed for international support as the country deals with the aftermath of a devastating 6.1 magnitude earthquake. More than 1,000 people have been killed and at least 1,500 people injured. Unknown numbers are buried in the rubble of ruined, often mud-built homes. Southeastern Paktika province has been the worst hit, and the UN is scrambling to provide emergency shelter and food aid. Rescue efforts are being hampered by heavy rain and lack of resources. Survivors and rescuers have told the BBC of villages completely destroyed near the epicenter of the quake, of ruined roads and mobile phone towers, and the fears that the death toll will rise further. It's the deadliest earthquake to strike the country in over 2 decades. It's a major challenge for the Taliban, the Islamist movement which regained power last year after the Western-backed government collapsed. The earthquake struck about 44 kilometers or 27 miles from the city of Khost, and tremors were as far away as Pakistan and India. Afghanistan is in the midst of a humanitarian and economic crisis, and Abdul Kahar Balki, a senior Taliban official, said the government was financially unable to assist the people to the extent that it's needed. Aid agencies in neighboring countries and world powers were helping, he said, but added the assistance needs to be scaled up to a very large extent because of its devastating earthquake, which hasn't been experienced in decades. The head of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, said the agency had fully mobilized over the disaster. Health teams, medical supplies, food, and emergency shelters were en route to the quake zone, UN officials said. So that's what's going on in Afghanistan. Oh, there's a little more. Most of the casualties so far have been in Gayan and Barmal districts of Paktika. A whole village in Gayan has reportedly been destroyed. There was rumbling, and my bed began to shake, one survivor, Sabir, told the BBC. The ceiling fell down. I was trapped, but I could see the sky. But I could see the sky. My shoulders were dislocated. My head was hurt, but I got out. I am sure that 7 or 9 people from my family who were in the same room as me are dead. A doctor in Paktika said medical workers were among the victims. We didn't have enough people in the facilities before the earthquake, and now the earthquake has ruined the little we had. I don't know how many of my colleagues are still alive. Communication following the quake is difficult because of the damage to mobile phone towers, and the death toll could rise further still, a local journalist in the area has told the BBC. Many people are not aware of the well-being of their relatives because their phones are not working, he said. My brother and his family died, and just learned many hours ago many villages have been destroyed. Afghanistan is prone to quakes and is located in a tectonically active region over a number of fault lines, including the Shaman Fault, the Hari Rud Fault, and the Central Badakistan Fault and the Darvaz Fault. Over the past decade, more than 7,000 people have been killed in earthquakes in the country. The UN Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reports that there is an average of 560 deaths per year from earthquakes. Most recently, back-to-back earthquakes in the country's west in January killed more than 20 people and destroyed hundreds of houses. Even before the Taliban takeover, Afghanistan's emergency services were stretched to deal with the natural disasters, with a few aircraft and helicopter available to rescuers. But more recently, the country has experienced a shortage of medical supplies. According to the UN, 93% of the households in Afghanistan suffer from food insecurity. Lucien Christian from the Red Cross says Afghanistan's dire economic situation meant their Afghan families not able to put food on the table. So we'll post a map of the country and where it is, where the earthquake struck. And hopefully we have some better news coming out of Afghanistan next week. But this week it's definitely not good. And hopefully we can hope the best for there to be more survivors that they find under the rubble. And hopefully they can get the support they need to the people who need it. On to Albania. As we remember last week, we were talking about the veto that Bulgaria had over North Macedonia for the EU talks, which was holding Albania back from getting into the EU. Well, Bulgaria seems to be moving towards lifting the veto on North Macedonia, thus paving the way for this country and Albania to advance on the path to European Union. The news was announced in a social media statement by the EU Commissioner for Neighbourhood and Enlargement, Oliver Verhelyi. In this statement, Verhelyi calls opposition leader Boyko Borisov a historic decision for Europe, having agreed to vote in Parliament to accept the opening of negotiations with North Macedonia. We thank the leader of the opposition GERB and Boyko Borisov for making a historical decision for the Europe and for North Macedonia to accept negotiation based on France's proposal allowing to proceed with opening accession negotiations with North Macedonia. We expect government making necessary proposals to Parl today so Europe can move forward, tweeted Verhelyi. On this part, Boyko Borisov called on the Bulgarian Prime Minister, Kirill Petkov, not to hide but to submit to Parliament a proposal to lift the veto on North Macedonia. According to Borisov, the proposal of the French presidency provided the best framework for an agreement between the two countries. I trust Macron and the European Commission, said Borisov. Meanwhile, he accused Prime Minister Petkov of lying in Brussels that Slavy Tiranov and Teodora Janukovska were preventing him from deciding to veto. Something is bothering him. Why is he afraid? Asked the chairman of GERB. Moreover, Borisov said today that he gives 59 votes in the Bulgarian parliament to lift the veto on North Macedonia. So as we remember from last week, we talked about the stoppage of Albania becoming a European nation, and it was all because they're lumped together with North Macedonia, and Bulgaria had a problem with North Macedonia for some of their system of beliefs and whatnot, and what it was to run a country. They wanted to make sure everyone was kosher with what Bulgaria believed in. So we will move on to Algeria next. Okay, we move on to Algeria, and this is from APS.dz. 11 terrorist supporters arrested in 1 week. Algiers, 11 terrorist supporters were arrested by detachments of the People's National Army, who also thwarted attempts to smuggle more than 13 quintals of cannabis resin across the border with Morocco during the period from June 15th to the 21st, according to an operational report published by the Ministry of National Defense. Just a short little article, but all in all, that's got a lot to say. Of course, Algiers and Morocco are having a lot of fights, are having a lot of arguments right now, especially over the Western Sahara. And that's a story we covered last week, so we will continue to focus on that story. Actually, we have another story from Algeria as well, because that story was kind of short. Okay, the next story is about Algeria, Nigeria revive talks on Saharan gas pipeline. Niger, and Nigeria held talks this week on the revival of a decades-old project to pipe gas across the Sahara, potential opportunity for Europe to diversify its gas sources. The three countries have set up a task force for the project and designated an entity to update the feasibility of the study, said Niger's oil ministry in a statement on Wednesday, following a 2-day meeting in Niger's capital, Abuja. The Trans-Saharan gas pipeline is an estimated $13 billion project that could send up to 30 billion cubic meters of gas supplies to Europe. The idea was first proposed more than 40 years ago, and an agreement signed between the countries in 2009, but progress stalled. The reveal comes at a strategic time as the European Union seeks to wean itself off of Russian gas following Russia's invasion of Ukraine and seeking alternative sources. The pipeline should allow Europe to diversify its sources of natural gas supply, but also allow several African states to access the high-value energy source, said the statement. With a length of 4,128 kilometers, or 2,565 miles, the pipeline would start in Wari, Nigeria, and end in Hassi R'Mel, Algeria, where it would connect to existing pipelines that run to Europe. Nigeria also took steps this month to move forward on another long-awaited pipeline, which would go through West Africa to Morocco and Morocco to Europe. Energy ministers of the three countries will meet again in Algiers at the end of July to validate the proposals of the newly installed task force, Niger statement said. So there's a picture of what the pipeline looks like, or the pipes being built. And so that'll be on the screen right about now. And we'll keep up with the stories of Algeria, going through next week. And we move on to Andorra next. The IMF Executive Board concludes 2022 Article 4 consultation with the Principality of Andorra. On June 10th, 2022, the Executive Board of International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, concluded its Article 4 consultation with the Principality of Andorra and endorsed the staff appraisal without a meeting. The Andorran economy rebounded strongly from the large contraction caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Growth in 2021, or 8.9%, was supported by a recovery in tourism, retail trade, construction, and professional services. Headline inflation rose to 4.9% in March 2022. The highlight reading in the last 10 years, however, price pressures were more limited than in the neighboring countries, thanks to long-term contracts with foreign energy suppliers that mitigated the rise in electricity prices. Labor market conditions tightened due to declining unemployment and a sharp rise in job vaccines, but did not create a significant wage pressures. Despite the rollback of most COVID-19 related measures, the overall policy mix remained supportive in 2021. With a growth projected at 4.5% in 2022, activity is expected to return to pre-crisis levels in the second half of 2022. However, the downside risks to the outlook are significant, related to the economic impact of Europe of the war in Ukraine. The sharp increase of commodity prices are unfavorable evolution of the pandemic, weaker recoveries in neighboring countries, and tighter financial conditions, strong fiscal buffers, a large current account surplus, newly accumulated external reserves, and a liquid and well-capitalized banks will help in the high uncertainty environment. In the medium term, real GDP growth is expected to converge to its 1.5% potential. Still, the 2020-2021 winter season and the sharp contraction in investment during the pandemic caused an estimated permanent income loss of about 3%. As in neighboring countries, high inflation will likely persist in 2022 and early 2023 due to the still high level of energy prices, but should ease thereafter. That's information coming out from the International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C. on their report on Andorra. So keep track of what's going on in the news with these countries every week. And next we go to Angola. Okay, on to Angola. The story is from africannews.com. It's what are the stakes in the DRC Rwanda dispute over M23 rebel group? The conflict between the Democratic Republic of Congo and its neighbors Rwanda and Uganda is long-standing. In the Great Lakes region, discrimination and control over minerals have resulted in the creation of several militias. Their so-called March 23rd movement emerged in 2012 and occupied the main city of North Kivu province. International pressure on Rwanda, which stopped funding the rebel group, and the military victory in the Congolese, backed by the UN forces, led the M23 to sign a truce the following year. But something failed. What the rebels say is that there has been no compliance on the part of the government with the agreement that was signed at the time with Joseph Kabila's son, and therefore at the time in 2021, the movement has resurfaced and resurfaced very strongly. Meanwhile, international forces of the Congolese government itself say the country of Uganda and also the Republic of Rwanda, through the President Paul Kagame, are supporting this rebel movement with arms and ammunition for the instability in the east, said Albino Pakisi, a political analyst. Angola chairs the International Conference of the Great Region and has in multiple occasions tried to build unity within the region. After receiving urgently his counterpart from the Democratic Republic of Congo, President Felix Tshisekedi, at the beginning of June, President João Lourenço tried to help solve the issue between the two parties. A task made difficult by the economics interests at stake. Congo right now has a lot of rebel groups that are always making a war in our country, especially in the eastern part of the country, because that's the part that has a lot of important minerals. But we don't know if foreign people want to have minerals from Congo. Why can't they make contracts with the government, says Jeremy Salvador Salabiaco, a DRC businessman. Technological changes have accelerated, and the demand for coltan or essential for making smartphones and computers. North Kivu, a Congolese region bordering Rwanda and Uganda, has more than 60% of the world's reserves. Well, those are stories from a little bit of Angola, but not quite a lot as we used to. So we will finish that story off, and we have one more story coming from Antigua and Barbuda next. And last but not least, we finish in Antigua and Barbuda. Story is from the AntiguanObserver.com. Country now under excessive heat wave warning. An excessive heat wave warning is currently in effect for Antigua and Barbuda, which is expected to last until today. The country has been under heat watch over the past few days, but that has now been upgraded. An excessive heat warning has been issued within 12 hours of the onset of dangerously hot conditions. The threshold for this warning is when two maximum heat index temperatures is expected to be between 41 or 106 degrees Fahrenheit or higher for 2 or more consecutive days, with the winds 18 kilometers or 11 miles per hour or less. Climatologist Dale Destin said yesterday that feels like temperatures will be at least as high as 45 Celsius or 113 degrees Fahrenheit. The threat of health problems is the greatest for sensitive groups, and Destin is warning of the potential for extensive impacts. While extreme heat can put everyone at risk for heat illnesses, health risks are greater for the elderly and young children, people with chronic illnesses such as breathing difficulties, heart conditions, or psychiatric illnesses, people who work or exercise in the heat, homeless people, and low-income earners, he said. The excessive heat could also trigger heat illnesses, including heat cramps, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. Heat illnesses can lead to long-term health problems, and heat stroke can lead to death, Destin said. Residents are being cautioned that if any syndromes of such conditions are present, such as dizziness or fainting, nausea or vomiting, headache or rapid breathing and heartbeat, or extreme thirst, they should immediately move to a cool place and drink liquids. Water is best. The most dangerous heat illness is heat stroke, with symptoms that include a complete partial loss of consciousness or confusion, the high body temperature. If caring for someone with these symptoms, persons should call 911 immediately. While waiting for help, cool the person right away by moving them to a cool place, applying cold water to large areas of the skin and clothing, and fanning the person as much as possible. Everyone should stay alert and take precautions, stay cool and hydrated. Check on vulnerable family members, neighbors, and friends. Those who take medication or have health conditions should ask their doctor if the medication increases their health risk in the heat, and they should follow the medical recommendations, the climatologist said. Climate change is causing global temperatures to rise. Greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide released into Earth's atmosphere in large volumes are trapping the sun's heat, causing the planet to warm. This has brought more extreme weather, including record-beating high temperatures across the world. Periods of intense heat do occur with regional or national weather systems, but scientists say that globally they are becoming more frequent, more intense, and are lasting longer as a result of global warming. So that's it for the news stories for this week. Next week, we will add Argentina to the stories. Join us every Thursday for news stories. Until next time, keep eating your own beat, take the road less traveled, and have a great day.